Thank you very much. Sorry for giving away the entire subject of my talk. So I'm Tariq Khokhar from the World Bank. I woke up on a plane this morning, and the first question I asked myself was, what proportion of Germany's land area is covered by forests? And I sort of reached into my bag and pulled out this little green data book, which I don't know if you've seen these things, but the bank has been publishing data and statistics for a hell of a long time in paper form. And this is still one of the most useful and accessible forms of data that the bank publish. And I was able to find out that 31.8% of Germany is covered in forest, while at 25,000 feet about to land in Frankfurt. So I thought that was pretty neat. What the heck is the World Bank? I think it's surprising the number of conversations I have when people don't really understand what the bank is or what it does. Stick up your hand if you've heard of the bank and the Open Data Initiative. Okay, and then keep your hand there if you feel like you've got a good idea about what exactly the World Bank does. Okay, yeah, I only started working there recently, so okay, fine. In short, that's the World Bank, money and knowledge. We've got two types of product: financial product, so loans, credits, grants, other sort of instruments, and knowledge, i.e. we lend people money and then we help them to spend it. That's really how you should think about the World Bank's open data. It's about these two areas that we have knowledge. Going back to the history of the whole initiative, do you recognize this guy? James Wolfenson? So he was the bank's president from 95 until 2005. And I'm told that he liked carrying one of these in his pocket, the World Development Indicators mini version, just because it's useful data at your fingertips. And someone asked, well, what if you don't have a jacket? And that would have been a really cool way to introduce open data. Unfortunately, that's not the real reason open data happened, but it's still a good point. What if you don't have a jacket? How do you access all of this data? So why would you want to do this? Data is there to make decisions and take action. And while I gave you a sort of silly example of me wanting to know forest coverage in Germany, there are actually pretty legitimate reasons for wanting data to make decisions, for two reasons really. One, to make decisions, and two, to have a say in the decisions that affect your own life. That's the sort of kind of where we're coming from. So in April 2010, we launched the Open Data Initiative. The vision was open data, open knowledge, open development. And it's really to provide a platform for other people to take the bank's data and come up with whatever they want, really. The bank acting as a platform is the idea. Shortly after, which is kind of the opposite way around the governments, we also released this thing, the Access to Information Policy, which most people outside the bank haven't really heard about. This is a policy-level decision to make the bank sort of default closed, going to default open. Basically, it's an institutional mandate that formalizes the Open Data Initiative, but it also means that any official bank document or bank record, you explicitly have to say what level of openness is this going to be, and you've got to explicitly close it if you want to. So that's an important thing. So there's a policy level anchoring of openness and open data in the World Bank. So prior to all that, we went from this, which is sort of pretty dry, statistical, query-driven stuff, to this, which is fancier. It's exploring, browsing. You can still access the sort of nerdy stuff in the back, but it's much more accessible. You've got different views by topic, by country, by indicator, and the big thing is really you're realizing there's a difference between the World Bank's clients, as in the people who previously paid us, and the people who previously lent money, people to whom we previously lent money, and a whole new raft of people who do neither of those things. So there are users of the bank's products and data, and there are clients of the bank, and these are two quite separate entities. Interestingly, this indicator page on the web, people still sort of complain that they can't get a printable one-page view of a country. So this is a lazy web request. If anyone wants to use the World Bank's data API to make a printable one-page version of countries, I'll give you a pineapple. So, multiple languages. Right now, there's about 7,000 indicators available there. 1,200 of those are in 5 different languages. So there's much more than just that data. The data you're seeing is coming from the World Development Indicators, the WDI. That's a very well curated, as we call it, data set. In many ways, the bank had it easy when we started with open data. When a government releases data sets, they're pretty controversial normally, right? You're talking about finances, expenditure, stuff that's going to raise eyebrows. This stuff, it's pretty non-controversial. It's statistics, and it's already well curated. So, in a sense, we did the easy stuff first. Don't get me wrong, there's still a lot of challenges with it, but we did the easy stuff first. And it's not just the WDI. There's much more data within the bank. But prior to having an open data initiative, it was fractured. It was all over the place. So we have a data catalog which brings together data sets from across the World Bank, so regional data sets, topical data sets, all in one kind of place. Right now, the World Bank's data website gets more user traffic than the World Bank website proper. It is the most high-profile web property that the bank has. So it offers a great deal of exposure to people who want to share their data. And that's really important. I mean, several other speakers have said it. The idea of praise is really great, but ask a statistician what's your number one sort of fantasy, you can say that, fantasy. I want my work to be used. I want my data to be used. That's a statistician's fantasy right there. And of course, we've got a page for every data set. There are, if you've got your $600 device, you can access the apps to look at this data as well. Interestingly, who is the audience for most of this data? You'll see it a bit later, but it's basically academics, researchers, policymakers. So, modular some other factors. They're likely to have an iPhone or a $600 device, but that doesn't excuse the fact that this data is not currently accessible on lower-end mobile platforms or even on low bandwidth web connections. Another thing we did was this project called Mapping for Results. You can read more about it at maps.worldbank.org. The idea was to geocode all of the bank's project activities. I'd recommend us looking at the site, but I think everyone can appreciate the value of putting a location on a project and how, even though this probably doesn't tell you that much in a sort of deep way, but it can certainly tell you where to look. If you see sort of unusual clusterings, or you see that all of the bank's projects happen to coincide with another development agency's projects, maybe you want to have a look a bit further. So it's a good sort of a tool to start exploring. And speaking of tools, so we've got the data, but the bank also has a bunch of tools that aren't that well publicized. So I'm going to publicize them a little bit. This thing is called PovCalNet, which is a remarkably geeky tool. But it's the same tool that bank economists use to come up with the $1-a-day poverty estimates. So you can go there and do that yourself. You can look at all the parameters and the bits of data that are used to come up with these calculations. Adept is a similar statistical analysis tool. It's not open source software, but it is free software that anyone can use to run these calculations. Similarly, iSimulate is a free web-based platform for collaborative economic simulations. Again, you have to be a sort of stats or econ nerd to naturally come across this, but I think we should talk about this more. We should share it with people who want to goof around and have a look at these sorts of things. And finally, you got WITS, which is all about trade data. And there's a similar set of tools and bits and pieces that go with that. Fine, so we've talked about what did we do with the data, what are the sort of tools that are available, what have we learned. So we've been doing this for a year, April to a bit more than a year. Initially, we learned that we had a very warm response. People like it when the big, scary institution becomes open. So this slide normally has 20 different blog pages of people saying, "Hey, look, isn't it great that the bank has done this?" So a warm response, a lot of public goodwill. Oh, it animates. That's why. Okay, fine. But free data is not free. The development data group, the business model of the group was previously selling subscriptions through libraries to data and selling subscriptions to corporate users of data. I think we lost several $1 million worth of revenue by making our data open. And at the same time, to make data open, you've got to invest money. I mean, building these fancy things is not free. Doing all the extra outreach work is not free either. So you're in this sort of, that doesn't make sense, right? Why the hell would you do that? But it's good for business. So usage, which is what we're after, usage of this data, which is a public good, goes through the roof. April 2010, I mean, of course, the launch of a big initiative, you expect to see a spike. But we kind of freaked out immediately afterwards, as you can tell, because we thought, oh dear, what the hell have we done? We see a big spike, and it's back to the baseline. But of course, this is telling about who our users are. US academic institutions, they go on vacation. As soon as they come back, there you go, data usage goes up. I don't know if can you see the little blip around September, October? Yeah, I'm sure you can. That was, I think, the single highest number of visitors to any World Bank website ever. And that was, and I just looked at it now, the LA Times ran a story on if you're a rich American and you want to leave the country, what's your best choice of country with the lowest marginal tax rate? And the World Bank has data on marginal tax rates. And most of the people in the development data group are like, who the hell would use that? The LA Times would. And they just used this widget. And they just drove a massive load of traffic to the World Bank. But it says something. You know, by opening data, we have no idea what data other people find useful. And I mean, there's no way we would have reached the number of users that the LA Times reached with that one little link. Incidentally, going back to the point about URIs in data, that link is currently broken. So we should fix it, because it's a popular link if people go back to the LA Times. I mean, and a few more stats if you like that kind of thing. About 100,000 unique visitors a week, which is about triple what we had before. And as of yesterday, since launching, we've had 4.6 million visitors, which is quite a few visitors, I think. Good. Licensing, people have talked about, remarkably important. A few people have said that the World Bank has amongst the most permissive licensing of any data of this sort. I mean, initially we were thinking of having a sort of freemium model, is that right? So you make it free for everybody apart from commercial users. But no, I mean, it's free for even commercial use. Interestingly, commercial users still want to have a sort of separate agreement. They're worried, you know, what if we pull it out from under them? So we're giving away data for free, but people still want to make sure there's a legal relationship between us. Okay, licensing matters. This one is a funny one. So getting users the data quickly. Of course, we didn't take the route of just making our data open in a raw format. We did do some presentation work on it. But there's a bit more to that, doing some intelligent work to assist people in querying. I mean, if you go to this search page and you can see the query there, you can see what this person is after, and the first result is a graph of what they're after. So doing these little hacks of the most popular things that people want, really useful for bringing people in and getting them to the information quickly. And then talking about companies who want to use our free data but still have a legal agreement, Google. So we have an agreement with Google. They take our data, they translate it into more languages than we do, and make it appear on Google searches. So if I'm giving this talk in other places, I'll often say, hey, so what's the population of blah, blah, blah? And then someone will shout out, and I'll ask them, how did you do it? Most of the time they've just done, they've done a Google search and they found it right there. And it's only when you look carefully that you realize you're actually using bank data that's been intermediated by somebody else. And that leads to the point. Other users can often reach, other people can reach users better. This guy's a good example. And there are many more like that. I mean, the World Bank is not the custodian of the communications piece of the data. Other people are. I'm sure you guys have come across the Apps for Development contest that the bank won. It's the first sort of global competition to create software for international development. And this was an incentive for people to do neat stuff. Rufus talked about it earlier. These are some of the winners. I guess people are familiar with Yourtopia, which is development beyond GDP. If you've not played with this, you really should. It's kind of neat. You sort of pick all the parameters that you'd think would make you happy as a person, and it computes where you should live. Almost everybody I speak to wants to live in Norway after doing that. So be warned. Be warned.
Is weather one of the indicators?
Well, even with is it not? Okay, fine. Yeah, Yourtopia 2.0 will factor in weather and sort of suicide rates as well, so it'll be all right. So a few people asked me some questions on Twitter before coming here. So who else uses our data? We don't really know. So we've got to, we find out when someone sends a huge crap ton of traffic our way, what's going on. And we know that US academic institutions use it because we've had these sort of long-term relationships with them. But when you make data openly available, you kind of lose track a little bit about who exactly is using it. And that's a piece of information that we'd really like to have. We've got subscriber lists, so we've got a way of communicating with at least a sample of who's using the data, but it's pretty broad. We know that much. And there's a definite base that is academic and whatnot users, but we can't honestly say, with certainty what is the spectrum of different interesting users of our data. But any suggestions or ways you think would be good to find that out, please let me know. Okay, naturally, anything you do has to have a 2.0, Open Data 2.0. So Robert Zellick's vision about open data is this notion of a healthcare worker in a village, mobile device, accessing information, improving development outcomes. To get there, you need this stuff. You need subnational, local, geocoded data, which we're getting, but sort of operationalizing that is really important. This capture here is actually from a paper-based map from Malawi that's 10 years old. So this was before open data. People were making maps and plotting hospitals and population on there and making useful decisions. The precedent for using data and doing interesting things with it is there before open data. The point is, to make sure open data catches up with these existing use cases that are known to be beneficial. We need more survey data. Better data that reaches more users. Right now, if someone in the bank does a survey, the results of that survey often just sit on their desk or they sit within their team. It's remarkable how reusable a lot of this stuff is, so it's really important that happens. And this stuff, administrative data. I don't know if you guys went to the talk earlier about the guy doing the Brazil historical statistical data. Did you see that? Yeah, sorry, there you are. This is exactly it. I mean, this is not historical data. This is current data, and it's not that useful in that form. So building national statistical capacity. Fine, the World Bank has a lot of intelligence on countries, but a lot of the intelligence comes from those country systems. And getting good data out of that is not a walk in the park. Then this is the key, really. We need to train and equip statisticians. Data does not just magically fall out of the sky. You have to do stuff to make it. And if we want to get data about the countries that are our clients and the countries where the bank wants to help eliminate poverty, you need statistical capacity in those countries. So that's really key. This ties into it, improving data collection. And then metadata as well. I don't know what the heck happened to that slide. Someone asked, have we considered using SDMX and RDF? Have you guys come across SDMX? It's a statistical data and metadata exchange standard that's, it was finalized pretty recently. So yes, the bank is fully committed to using SDMX. It's in the pipeline. In terms of linked data, yeah, getting there. I think things like code lists for our projects data, definitely for linked data. There's a thing called IATI, the International Aid Transparency Initiative, and the intention is for that to have linked data with it as well. So that's kind of in the pipeline, but not really high on the radar. And again, new possibilities for collecting data using PDAs and cell phones and whatnot. Oh God, someone's animated this slide for me. So the big vision is new types of data. Statistical data is what's there. Operational and financial data. So this is the controversial stuff, right? This was easy. This is the hard stuff. That's coming. Later this month, next month, you'll start to see operational and financial data from the World Bank. And then new data, all this survey stuff, the microdata, just new wacky data sets that people want to promote will be coming on there. And this is the plan. You've got to engage people. You want to get incentives for use, make it more accessible and do the outreach piece. And that's the thing that will actually lead to that data having a difference. This notion of citizen feedback, making sure that this gets applied in some way. And the mobile and mapping bit, people talk about it a lot, but it's really important. And that's kind of it. So going back to that story at the beginning, I can imagine this lady waking up one morning, probably not on a plane, wanting to know something about local healthcare provision, or she just wants to know what's the best thing to do in a certain situation that is going to affect the life of my child. Having better access to data, whether it's sort of intermediated by somebody else or it's done directly, is really important, and that's why open data has the potential for doing something quite good. And until we're kind of able to tell that story not as a hypothetical, there's still a lot of stuff to do. And that's it.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Are there any questions in the back there? Why is it open this back?
You're kind of a UN institution. What about the other UN institutions in terms of releasing data? Have you managed to influence them? I was thinking, you know, the bank and the fund. I guess the fund is rather different,
yes,
rather narrower. But it would be interesting to know what they're lending and what the agreements are in terms of propping up the world financial system, for example.
Very true. I can't speak about the IMF. I don't know much about it. But other UN institutions, so IATI, this International Aid Transparency Initiative, the UNDP are signatories of that. So they will be publishing financial data. Right now, people at OECD DAC, they're having conversations with us about becoming an open data provider as well. So there is influence from the bank on this, but I mean, there's no sort of, you know, there's no formal group doing it, if that makes sense.
Okay. Any more questions? All right. Sorry.
The World Bank is dealing mostly with third world countries. Does this data visualization, this information help to make sure that you go in the right projects? Let's say, my point is the World Bank, there is often influence from the local governments that they could give you the wrong information or that they try to push you on projects which are not so interesting. I'm carefully to use the word corruption, but let's say that some areas are influenced.
That's a good question. At a sort of policy or sort of pre-project creation level, I don't know, just because the bank doesn't publish sort of future plans very much, and governments tend not to publish future plans for projects either. So there, I don't know. What I can say is that there's a whole team of people in the bank from Washington, D.C. who can look at data that comes from countries and identify patterns that predict corruption. I had the most amazing half day with this guy called, I forget his name, David something. He's the sort of senior prosecutor for corruption in the World Bank. And he just showed me this spreadsheet. I should have brought it with me. Of sort of, there's 6 rows, and it represents 6 companies bidding on a road infrastructure project. And he said, okay, I look at the spreadsheet for 20 minutes, and I conclude that this is a 6-member cartel that are colluding to bid on this road infrastructure project. And I thought, well, how the hell do you know that? And they've got a bunch of tests and signals they can use with this data. So they see that they do some computation and they realize that the final bid is kind of stacked. So you've got one high bid and then you've got sort of roughly even increments between the rest of the bids. That's a dead giveaway. Naturally, bids shouldn't come in like that. And then when the bid is pipelined, as in you see different components of it, the component that you think should be the cheapest, as in the bit when people are just digging road, right? You can hire anyone to do that. That's the bit that's most overpriced. So signals like that will tell you, like, oh no, something is bad here. And you can do that from Washington, which is why this sort of domestic capacity is really important. If you could have that kind of skill, you know, in a country procurement office, you've got better opportunities for detecting this kind of thing.
Thank you. Another question in the front.
Hi, Tariq. I'm Dinesh, and I work with a TechSoup, which is an organization that intermediates between donors and recipients of technology products. One of the things that I'm also working on is trying to acquire information from governments and from World Bank data and all that, and try to publish in ways that are more meaningful for our customers. Know about IATI, and they are very heavily involved also in data standards. You know. Now, does the World Bank also want to move towards establishing some global standards in publishing data, whatever data they're publishing, and also disseminating it through the APIs and everything? Or would you still like to maintain your proprietary standards? Or what's the real purpose of this IATI engagement? Or
Sure.
Yeah.
So the World Bank is a founding signatory of IATI, the International Aid Transparency Initiative. And being a signatory means that you're politically committed to it, and you're also technically committed to publish data. So the World Bank published IATI data about 2 months ago. There's only 3 donors who've done it so far: DFID, the Hewlett Foundation, and the World Bank. And to be honest, right now, IATI data isn't brilliant. I mean, it's still early days. The standard is there, but the quality of the data isn't up there yet. To get quality, you need more data and you need more use. But I mean, disclaimer, I used to work for IATI. So the picture looks as though more and better data will be coming along, and with that comes better tools, more demand for sort of standardization and improvement of stuff. But yes, the World Bank is involved in standardizing this sort of development data.
Any further questions?
Just a short one. You mentioned that one of the next challenges is opening up your business and operational data. And I'm just wondering whether you consider to involve e-government or any other social media-based solutions for evaluating your projects and in that way to improve your performance.
Yes. So as far as I understand it, the way that the release of this sort of data will happen will be more like the raw data side rather than the interpreted data that you see. So you'll have access to sort of transaction level information and project level information. And all of these things, you'd be able to connect them to social media pretty easily. So right now, you can find an indicator or a data set on the bank site and hit a button and tweet it out or link to it pretty easily. You should be able to do that with financial data as well. So at least there are nodes or endpoints of data that you can start having conversations around or whatnot. Further to that, I'm not sure. I mean, we can talk more if you've got ideas about how to make that better.
Any further questions? Okay, then thank you again.